You can hear me now, and we're just going to start the song by Jackson Browne called Before the Deluge.
Before the deluge.
Some of them were dreamers, some of them were fools who were making plans and thinking of the future. And with the energy of the innocent, they were gathering the tools they would need to make their journey back to nature. And while the sand slipped through the opening and their hands reached for the golden ring, with their hearts they turned to each other's hearts for refuge. In the troubled years that came before the deluge,
some of them pain, and for some of them it was only the moment that mattered. And on the brave and crazy wings of youth, they went flying around in the rain, and their feathers once so fine grew torn and tattered. And in the end, they traded their tired wings for the resignation that living brings, and exchanged love's bright and fragile glow for the glitter and the rouge. And in a moment, they were swept before the deluge. Now let the music keep our spirits high. Let the buildings keep our children dry. Let creation reveal its secrets by and by. By and by. When the light that's lost within us reaches the sky. Some of them were angry at the way the earth was abused by the men who learned how to forge her beauty into power. And they struggled to protect her from them, only to be confused by the magnitude of her fury in the final hour. And when the sand was gone and the time arrived, in the naked dawn only a few survived. And in attempt to understand a thing so simple and so huge, believed that they were meant to live after the deluge. Let the music keep our spirits high. Let the buildings keep our children dry. Let creation reveal its secrets by and by. By and by. When the light that's lost within us reaches the sky.
Thank you very much,
Dan and
Bruce.
Deb, that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us to play that. We're right there with you, but it's the least we can do.
Someday we'll be ready to hear the applause again, but it's coming through the airwaves to you.
Okay.
I'm very
Well-
thankful too that we also have Julia Bryan, the chair of Democrats Abroad Global, with us this evening or this afternoon. And she has agreed to say a couple of words about what Democrats Abroad is up to right now. Julia?
Everyone, well, thank you, Danny and Deb. That was really beautiful. And thank you, Bruce, for inviting me. And I also just want to say hello, Austria. It's so great to see you all. And I wish I could come and visit.
Okay.
We are so close and yet still so far away. I'm in Prague, Czech Republic. So really literally up the road just a little bit. And again, as soon as the lockdowns are over, and you guys can come and visit, just come head my way. But about what we're up to, this week has reminded me yet again that the work we all did last year, getting out the vote, makes a difference. As we heard from President Biden about his plans to drastically cut emissions in the next 8 years. This week, it's amazing. We saw accountability brought to bear for George Floyd. And I just want to say, we know there's still so much to be done to protect people of color and bring justice to policing. And right now, Democrats Abroad is currently running an action I'll add to the chat box, which is basically we're asking everyone to call your senators. You can call or you can message your senators about the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And that link just gives you some ideas on what to say, but you don't have to say too much. It's just a great thing to do. Tell them you support this act, and it gives you contact information. But it all comes down to voting. And we know that we must protect our votes. So we are also working a lot on protecting our votes. We're doing work at the state level. We are working on bills in New Jersey and in New York. We have teams in Arizona and Texas working. And we also are working on an amicus curiae brief in Georgia against 531, which is a really horrible bill. That amicus brief will be filed right on the heels of as soon as the cases are filed. So we have all the material gathered and it's just waiting to go in as soon as the plaintiffs respond. So that's what's happening at the state level. We are also working, we're doing a great deal of work at the federal level. We have an amendment that we are working on with Senator Klobuchar's team and about 5 or 6 other senators it's starting to roll about never resided. I'll also post a link in the chat box for that amendment, and the language that we're asking will either be an amendment to S1 or it will be its own standalone bill. It's up to Klobuchar's team to decide. We are currently looking for a Republican sponsor because they need to have people on both sides of the hill. But the good news is that Republicans overseas has said they're interested. We have 6 military family groups who've signed on and are also interested. And we're working on expanding the teams. So I mean, maybe getting in touch with everybody. We want to make sure we're reaching out to senators again as soon as that gets introduced, and we'll be really making sure we're calling everybody and saying this is important, because I want to tell you why this is important. 35% of children born abroad are impacted by never resided laws. 35%. That's tremendous. People can't say, oh, it's just 14 states. It's 14 states that include Texas and Florida and Pennsylvania. These are big states. We have a lot of voters there. So it's a really important thing that we're doing, working to enfranchise voters. I think that's my 2 minutes. So I will hand the mic back to you, Bruce, but thank you everyone for inviting me, and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Julia. You may have noticed, if you haven't, I've started recording the meeting too. And if you would prefer not to be seen, perhaps you could shut off your camera. We want to make this available after the fact for all of those who aren't with us right now, but who we want to recruit to take some action so that we can get the job done. And with that, I'd like to also thank Sue Altsness, our Progressive Democrats Abroad Caucus co-chair, who is with us coming from Toronto. And Sue, could you say a few words about proDA?
Yes, I'm happy to, Bruce. I want to first say I'm the proud parent of a never resided. She does get to vote. Sorry, they do get to vote in Connecticut, but I really appreciate Democrats Abroad work in that area. So I am actually calling in from the traditional territories outside of Toronto on the West End, which are covered by a treaty called the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. It was an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. And I share that out of respect for the Indigenous peoples who cared for this area, but also for their example in forming a treaty of that kind. And I believe, along with many members of the Progressive Caucus and Democrats abroad, that true deep democracy is what will lead to policies that care for everyday people and the planet, and put those with a higher value above making money. So there are a couple of urgent actions that are happening within the Progressive Caucus right now. We're sharing a way for folks all around the world to push directly for the people voting rights measure. There's a few senators that will determine its fate, and there's a phone banking effort that's going to voters in those states specifically. And thankfully, it's on Call Hub, which means that our members around the world can participate. They don't need a phone to call into the state. So I'll pop the link for that into the chat, and we have somebody who's volunteered to help people who need assistance getting to that. We also have an activity coming up, which is our monthly book discussion. And on Monday, it's about how to be an anti-capitalist, which I think applies very closely to today's discussion. And happily, we're able to make the books available to anyone who has access or affordability issues. So I'd like to say that proDA has groups forming in Germany, China, Singapore, Sweden, Austria, and some other places around the world. And heartfelt thanks to Bruce and the proDA Austria group for the Biden-Harris Progress Reports series. We're just delighted that you're doing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. This is actually number 3, and there will be a number 4. I'd like to continue right away by thanking Michelle Deatrick very, very much for joining us this afternoon for her. And I'd like to refer to Michelle as a Renaissance woman, because if you listen to what she's done already in her life, it's more than I'm going to do in my entire life. She is the first ever DNC Environmental and Climate Crisis National Chairwoman. She's a policy analyst, editor, an internationally honored poet, and I'm not done. She is a union member, UAW Local 2230, member of the National Writers Union, and she has done many more things in the labor segment of her life. She also is a recent county commissioner in the state of Michigan who flipped a rural 3-time red seat to blue. She's a former Peace Corps volunteer, and she's chair of the Women's March in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She has fought new pipelines and drilling operations in Michigan, and she can do that right from her backyard because she is also a farmer with 80 acres of farmland there in Michigan. And tonight, or this afternoon, she is going to speak to us a little bit about environment, fighting climate crisis, and trying to establish a just transition within the context of the Democratic Party platform. Michelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm speaking to you from Southeast Michigan on Anishinaabe lands. And like Julia, I'd love to visit you all, but it's a little further for me. I want to start with my absolutely heartfelt gratitude to Progressive Democrats abroad for holding this amazing event, and for Julia Bryan's leadership, to Bruce Murray for organizing, and to Deb and Danny for the wonderful song. Let music and poetry maybe keep our spirits high indeed. That was a wonderful way to start. And to all of you for the really crucial, important work Democrats abroad does, getting out the vote and your unique perspectives that Americans who live on the mainland need to hear. You are, as individuals and as a community of communities, you bring unique perspectives to the multiple thorny problems that we're facing as a democratic community and as a country and as a planet. Challenges, the pandemic, the climate emergency, gun violence, police brutality, racial injustice, the economic devastation that inequitably harm Black, Brown, Indigenous, less resourced people, women, youth, our elders. But as you know, they also give us unprecedented opportunities, which I'm going to be turning to in a minute. A chance to really re-envision our future, a chance to build back better. It's a good slogan. Transitioning off fossil fuels and onto clean renewable energy, creating millions of good jobs in the process, and a future that we want to live in. So I'll be talking about the 2020 Democratic Party platform on climate, and I was asked to briefly describe how it was created. We Democrats love committees. So this brief story involves talking about a lot of committees. And yeah, thank you for sharing the slides, Bruce. So just over a year ago, though it feels like much longer, I think, to most of us, with the Democratic presidential primary decided and our candidate chosen, the 6 Biden-Sanders unity task forces were launched and set to work on forging policy recommendations in 6 areas. And the fact that one of those 6 areas was climate change was unprecedented for the Democratic Party. And that its members included our now climate envoy, John Kerry, and our now White House climate advisor, Gina McCarthy, and also amazing people like environmental justice advocate, Catherine Flowers, Sunrise co-founder Varshini Prakash, and AOC. All of this was a good sign of a real sea change in the party, a good kind of sea change, not like rising seas, a new centering of both climate and environmental justice, and then understanding recognition of the urgency and scope of the crisis. So the recommendations of that committee, the Unity Climate Task Force, along with invited testimony, were considered strongly in the initial drafting of the platform, which was done by a different committee, the Platform Drafting Committee, originally named. And then that draft was then considered and amended by the actual Democratic Party Platform Committee, on which I served in midsummer. So I am proud that the DNC Environment and Climate Crisis Council, usually just called the Climate Council for reasons that are obvious, worked with the then Biden campaign and the DNC Platform Committee to ensure that the 2020 Democratic Party platform was the boldest climate platform, the most environmental justice focused platform in party history. The Biden team were very open to our feedback and concerns, and we made significant advancements. And the platform is now the blueprint for governance and for our leaders at all levels of government across the country. And I refer to it in my work in my county's environmental council, saying, well, it's in the platform since we're all Democrats. So what does it look like? It commits, and I'm not going to read all of the bullet points here, but I am going to highlight a few and comment on them. The commitment to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, doubling the Obama commitment, was a brand new commitment for the Democratic Party at the national level. The commitment to eliminating carbon emissions by 2030 will require a major reset and transformation of the electrical grid and greatly accelerated renewable energy reliance. And there are some targets, commitments for doing that. The net zero emissions from agriculture is really interesting. The goal is to be first in the world at an unspecified date. So actual contributions for agriculture to greenhouse gas pollution in the US, the old EPA had an estimate that that was 9% of emissions, which is drastically undercounting. It's probably around 15 to 20%, maybe even a little higher. So if we go to the next slide, which focuses on how the platform puts communities and working families above fossil fuel corporations and about time. The one that I was particularly happy about, and it was actually a win for the council, was getting 40% of environment investment benefits going to frontline and vulnerable communities, which are disproportionately Black, Brown, and Indigenous. And the one about holding polluters accountable is so important and fulfills a campaign promise that Joe Biden had made. Right now, if Enbridge or BP has an oil spill, they can and do just write off the costs of the cleanup. So next slide. So by way of background on 3 measures here related to public lands, our federal public lands together make up an area bigger than Texas. So any climate or environmental justice policy impacting them has a big impact. So reversing the Trump rollbacks on public land protections is a crucial first step to protect places like the Tongass National Forest in Alaska, which has in sacred ancestral indigenous areas and is also a major carbon sink. Protecting 30% of US lands and oceans by 2030. We currently protect 26% of coastal waters, but just 12% of our land. So this is a huge commitment and is aligned with that 1.5 degrees Celsius maximum global warming goal in the Paris Agreement and that we hope to hit. And banning new oil and gas drilling, well, almost 25% of greenhouse gas pollution in the US comes from fossil fuels extracted from public lands and waters. So that's a big chunk right there. So last slide for me. I don't really have comments on this. I know someone else is going to be talking about the Paris Agreement. Just a little explanation of the border carbon adjustment fee, which I thought would be a great interest to you all. It's for countries that fail. The intent is that it's for countries that fail to live up to their commitments under Paris. So polluters won't undermine American competitiveness. I do, before handing it over to the next speaker, want to invite you to please sign the council's petition in support of bold action by Congress on the American Jobs Plan, which you'll hear about soon, and also the further steps that we need to take beyond that. And it's at dncclimate.org. I'll drop it in the chat. I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And we are going to continue with this PowerPoint presentation series. And our next speaker will take a step back and give us the big picture, looking at the Paris Agreement and the Global Climate Summit that the United States is hosting, more or less even as we speak. Renee, are you ready?
I'm ready. The Paris Agreement, as has been mentioned, and I think it's been pretty much in the news, the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. However, it feels disconcerting to read now in the news that we are already at 1.1, maybe even 1.2 degrees Celsius warming. And so that doesn't give us much time to put the brakes on, but I feel optimistic that with the United States back on board, we can team up with the EU and help corral some of the other nations who are a little more hesitant. These nationally determined contributions, many of us have seen reference to NDCs and may not know exactly what that means. So nationally determined contributions essentially are what each nation will agree to do to contribute to keeping that Celsius goal. Back to that goal, by the way, I have also just recently read in some articles that even at 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's not as if life will be beautiful all day long. I mean, that still means that there will be some, flooding and the climate disasters that have already begun, with everything from volcanoes to fires to oceans rising and threatening and destroying homelands for many people, particularly in the nations, in the poorer nations of the world. So 1.5 degree, it's important for us all to remember, and when we're talking to others, that this is the minimum, that's the minimum that we could do. Too bad we can't turn back the clock, and maybe that is a possibility. The Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee, I think, is something that is going to be given teeth in the COP, the COP26, which is the Conference of Parties in Glasgow in November. Essentially figuring out how we can make sure that countries, including our country, the United States, will comply with some of the things that we commit to. The next slide. Today, the U.S. Earth Day Global Summit, Climate Summit, that is part of Biden's first 100 days, is pretty exciting because it, at least for me as a US American, helps me feel like, well, we haven't completely dropped off the map in terms of our commitment to the climate. Obviously, there's still we still need to rebuild a lot of bridges to many nations who don't trust, having experienced the previous 4 years of the United States literally just dropping the ball and saying we are walking off the court. In this case, this is the United States' chance through Biden to get, not only show that we're back on board, but that we want to lead. Likely in conjunction with the European Union. The EU has taken the lead and has taken up the slack in these past 4 years, putting a 55% goal of carbon reduction. And we are coming in with what looks like to be a 50% commitment. So we hope that we can continue that. Some of the other points, obviously a big piece of that will be mobilizing the public and private sector finance. That will be our biggest challenge, especially the way our current government is we've got a little bit of a majority in the House, and we want to help get the senators to vote in the right way with our split in the Senate. I would move down a little bit on this slide because you can also all read this for yourself. No, not yet. Just a few other things. Just to mention showcasing subnational and non-state actors, which I think essentially means to not just leave it to federal governments, but to state governments and to NGOs, particularly focusing on NGOs that are strong. Everybody from World Wildlife Foundation to some others that don't come to mind at this moment. And lastly, we want to, of course, there are global security challenges, but the role of nature-based solutions to help achieve the net zero by the 2050 goals, nature-based solutions, for example, just thinking of trees, maybe planting more trees, or realizing that the ocean, there's a term that Bruce helped educate me with called a carbon sink, which essentially it's a collecting place for the carbon to be removed from our Earth and help reduce the global warming. So these are the goals of, or at least certainly the things that will be addressed, hopefully during the climate summit today.
Thank you very much, Renee. And now I think we're ready to circle back to the United States and what it plans to do and try to become a little bit more concrete. And in the current state, we're looking at the Biden team being very successful with the American Rescue Plan, which albeit provides a number of temporary measures, but that has been a really great success in these first 100 days. So much so that the administration has spaced out a little bit, building back better, and is talking more now about the American Jobs Plan, the compendium to the American Rescue Plan. And Raina Salganev, another proDA member and Democrats Abroad Austria member and leader, is going to talk to us a little bit about the American Jobs Plan and the Made in America tax plan. Raina?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, today, whatever time it is where you are. My job is the really dry one of going through the jobs plan and telling you what's in it. It's huge, and the major points are on the PowerPoint that Bruce has on the screen. And each of those, though, involves a lot of detail. And so I'm just going to go through and give you the highlights. On some of these, I do have some of my own notes on things that I thought would be important to add in terms of if I thought it was a good idea or not, or if it could have been bolder. As for our discussion later, I think a lot of us are considering this a great start, but that it really does need to be much, much bigger. In total, the plan will invest about $2 trillion in a decade. If passed alongside by Biden's Made in America corporate tax plan, it will be fully paid for within the next 15 years and reduce deficits in the years after. So the first, 621 billion will go to fix highways, rebuild bridges, upgrade ports, airports, and public transit. The breakdown is 115 billion to modernize bridges, highways, and main streets in most need of repair, and 20 billion for road safety programs. 85 billion to modernize existing transit and help agencies expand their systems to meet rider demand. Just for perspective, the Department of Transportation estimates that rather than 85 billion, 105 billion is needed for this. And just as an example, New York City alone needs 60 billion for its MTA. 80 billion to Amtrak for repairs, modernization improvements, and new corridors. Experts say rail needs far more than this. It's just a start. And as an example, the Northeast Corridor will need about 40 billion alone from the 80 billion. 174 billion investment to win the EV market, the electric vehicle market, and grants to build a national network of 500,000 EV chargers by 2030. 25 billion will go to our airports, 17 to inland waterways, ports, land ports of entry, and ferries. 50 billion to improve infrastructure resilience, make our infrastructure more resilient in the face of ever increasing severe floods, wildfires, hurricanes, and other risks. Again, for perspective, they're giving 50 billion in 2020. Last year alone, the US faced 22 extreme weather and climate disaster events, with losses exceeding 1 billion each, with a cumulative price tag of $95 billion. Major theme: deliver clean drinking water, a renewed electrical grid, and high-speed broadband to all Americans. So 111 billion to clean and safe drinking water. 45 billion to replace 100% of the nation's lead pipes and service lines, which is amazing. 56 billion in grants and loans to upgrade and modernize America's drinking water, wastewater, stormwater systems, tackle new contaminants, and support clean water infrastructure across rural America. It also includes money to go to tribes, territories, and disadvantaged communities. I'm a little confused about this because they listed it as loans and not grants. And I thought that that should be grants as well and not loans to these distressed communities. 10 billion to monitor and remediate PFAS in drinking water. 100 billion to revitalize our digital infrastructure, to build high-speed broadband infrastructure to reach 100% coverage, promote price transparency and competition among internet providers, and reduce the cost of broadband internet service. $100 billion to re-energize America's power infrastructure, which includes modernizing the electric grid, establish an energy efficiency and clean electricity standards, which leverages the carbon pollution-free energy provided by nuclear and hydropower, and get to 100% carbon pollution-free power by 2035. The only comment I had about this was I wasn't sure why renewable sources were not also included, like wind and solar. They weren't mentioned. 16 billion to pay union jobs to plug orphan wells and gas wells and cleaning up abandoned mines. Again, my only thought on this was why should taxpayers foot the bill on this and not charge the oil and gas industry with some kind of a tiny tax. 5 billion investment in the remediation and redevelopment of brownfield and Superfund sites. Build next generation industries in distressed communities. Money also, it doesn't specify how much, for carbon capture and sequestration and ensure permanent storage. Being Earth Day, I feel free to say, this has not been proven that is even possible to do yet. And I feel that it's a continuation of our dependence on fossil fuels. And I understand that it's probably a deal with the right, but I don't feel it really has a place here. 10 billion to create the Civilian Climate Corps conserving public lands and waterways. The next theme, 213 billion to build, preserve, and retrofit more than 2 million homes and commercial buildings, modernize our nation's schools and childcare facilities, and upgrade veterans, hospitals, and federal buildings. Produce, preserve, and retrofit more than 1 million affordable, resilient, accessible, energy efficient, and electrified housing units. That's a lot. Build and rehabilitate more than 500,000 homes for low and middle income home buyers by passing his Neighborhood Homes Investment Act that offers 50 billion in tax credits. A grant program that rewards jurisdictions that eliminate exclusionary zoning and harmful land use policies. This, again, is a little mixed. According to a new poll by Vox and Data for Progress, a majority of voters say they'd support withholding federal money completely from cities and states that prevent more affordable types of housing from being built, and that this should be more of a requirement, stick, than an option, carrot. 40 billion to improve the infrastructure of the public housing system. Right now, the Public Housing Capital Fund, which Congress provides to pay for repairs, has been underfunded for so long that we now lose more than 10,000 public housing apartments every year because they're no longer habitable. 3 out of 4 American households who are eligible for HUD assistance don't get it because of lack of funding. And according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, HUD needs 70 billion to repair public housing, not 40 billion. 100 billion to modernize, upgrade, and build new public schools. 12 billion to community college infrastructure. 18 billion to modernize the Veteran Affairs hospitals and clinics.
Could I interrupt for a moment?
Yeah.
You're very impressively going into the weeds on these items, and I think that's very important. I'm also thinking that Michelle Deatrick is able to stay with us for just another 15 minutes. And I'd like to take advantage of her staying with us and perhaps adjust a little bit right now and close our presentation temporarily and open the discussion for those who might want to ask her questions, as long as she can stay with us.
Absolutely.
Okay?
I was learning so much, Rena. Thank you. That is amazing. I saw Sue commented that, I think it was Sue mentioned, it would be really nice if someone, I don't mean Rena, made a graph, you know, so that we could see all this laid out, because what you've done is that work of extracting it from documents. I did share in chat the White House, probably the OMB, the Office of Management Budget, did a state-by-state analysis of what benefits would accrue to each state. I don't know if they did territories as well, but so that's an interesting thing. I haven't been able to dive into that very much, but so yeah, I have to actually leave in 11 minutes. So I'd be happy to take any questions, or I don't expect 11 minutes of questions, but if you have any thoughts, advice for the council, anything's good.
Thanks, Michelle. Renee is going to be in charge of our queue. And those of you who would like to speak, ask a question, please use our routine * hands up in the chat box. And Renee will keep the queue, and we'll try to use 10 or 11 minutes as well as we can, and then return to our PowerPoint presentation to go into the weeds a little bit longer. I'd like to ask a first question. We're before the deluge. I'm thinking of that message again, and what a deluge of information and what a deluge of activity we're experiencing right now. And many of us are really hopeful with that climate clock ticking that the House and the Senate are going to come to an agreement on infrastructure sooner than later. And Michelle, could you give us a kind of off-the-cuff assessment of what the time framework looks like to you right now?
As long as you agree not to write the article if I'm wrong. Nancy Pelosi has said she hopes to bring this to a conclusion around July 4th. And I am impressed, and she's absolutely right. I mean, the clock is ticking. When I hear about COPE not being till November, I'm like, that's 7 months out of our 8.5 years left, right? I hope everyone's going to move forward sooner than that. The estimates I'm hearing from people in DC who know this stuff much more than I do is, September, October even. There may be others here who have relationships with people on the Hill. So love to hear what you're hearing, but that's what I've heard.
Thank you. Renee, do we have someone in the queue?
Bruce, the other Bruce, Richard Miller, hands up.
Hi, thanks very much. Such a great and interesting conversation for Earth Day. I have just a question about if we are to try to get some of this legislation on climate change passed. I mean, is there movement in a bipartisan way? Could we actually work with a group of Republicans that can meet us halfway to actually come to sort of a bipartisan agreement so we can actually get some of these things passed? So I'm just wondering if anyone has some insights on perhaps either joint efforts, bipartisan efforts to try to find some common ground.
I believe there is bipartisan support for the House and the Senate versions of the agriculture bills that just recently came forward. So I have not had time to dig into the weeds on those. And I have a deep self-interest as well as a general climate interest in them. So I'm really hoping there is support for small organic and regenerative farming, and for the kinds of things that I can't remember who was talking about, the opportunities for at least not releasing more carbon from the soil, even if we can't sequester, and hopefully sequestering through agriculture. But there are a lot of efforts around trying to get bipartisan support for a carbon tax and dividend scheme. And to my knowledge, there are no Republicans that have signed on to that, despite a couple of years of effort. I think Lisa Murkowski might be kind of So this is me. I'm not talking for the Biden administration here, but I think we have to fix the filibuster. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much at stake here that too much compromise is dooming the planet. There's some recent science that's talking about us getting to 1.5 degrees by 2024. We're at 1.2 now. We're on a trajectory to 3-4 degrees, which is scary. So, but it would be great if they came on board, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. And in my segment, I'm going to talk a little bit more about options for reconciliation and bipartisanship and executive orders. And I think there's hope for getting quite a bit done in 2021. And I think it's really, really crucial. And my opinion is that it's not a good idea to wait until July, August, or September, because we have 2 more shots at reconciliation this year. I think we need to know what we can do with bipartisan measures and then go for the rest through reconciliation as quickly as possible. Renee, do we have a next person in the queue?
No one in the queue, but we've had some good, I don't know if everybody has their chat up. So Raina, for example, gave a good opinion with regard to Republican, Raina's opinion is saying they might agree that climate change exists, but they may not sign off because of the price tag. And Julia also commented about we can't wait on the filibuster rule to get things moving. But no one else has a hands up except now Julia.
Just want to comment though that the GOP leadership in DC is so out of touch with actual Republicans on the ground who are not only recognizing climate change, but support a lot of these measures that Joe Biden's proposing.
Julia?
Well, I think that's a really good point. And, you know, something that we can do, and I'm sure Bruce is going to talk about it, is reaching out to our the Republicans overseas counterparts who, you know, they're not my favorite people to work with, but it's important to get them when we're working on bills. It's very useful to have them going in with us to talk with Republican senators. And those senators need to be hearing in a kind of organized fashion about the bills like that Michelle is working on, you know, the work that we're doing as well. And what I was going to mention very quickly is that, you know, it's really true that we cannot wait for the filibuster. The people I'm talking to on the Hill are saying, well, we don't know when it's going to happen. There's no plans at the that we see now for change. And so we need to make small bills that can have bipartisan support, which I think is really an interesting, I mean, I think that's one reason why they're thinking about putting our never resided, taking it out of S1, out of the For the People Act and making it a separate bill. So that's what I'm hearing on the Hill right now. So I'd be interested, Michelle, in what you're hearing as well in that regard, in terms of smaller chunks of legislation that can get bipartisan support.
There's definitely a movement toward doing that. And I think there is some disagreement about the best strategy. There are some people who are very concerned about just getting so carved up that we don't really in the end accomplish anything and end up giving away. So it's a very tough situation.
Michelle, also,
but I do see our Democratic caucus really dedicated to getting everything they can done, even if there's disagreement about strategy, which, yeah. Yeah.
Michelle participated in a panel discussion earlier today in China, and there was a member of the leadership of the Sunrise Movement participating, and he too addressed this topic, saying there, like the president says, there is bipartisan support for much of what we want to do. It's not in Congress, it's all over the United States in the citizenship. And it seems very important as we move through 2021 to leverage that bipartisan support all over the United States that even includes the business community more and more. Remember, within the last 2 weeks, I think it was maybe as many as 300 business leaders signed a letter saying that by 2030, we need to achieve really ambitious CO2 reduction goals. And I think that puts the Republican base to which we've been referring the last 4, 6, 8 years in a pretty tough position. I also believe that, the Republican Senate leadership is saying that it would be willing to go with a smaller infrastructure package of about 800 billion. And I believe in a 1-2 punch, we ought to take that 800 billion with bipartisan support. And once we have that in the pocket, then go back to reconciliation for 2 more tribes in this year, which is a really, really important year.
It is. I'm so glad to have been here. Thank you so much, Bruce, Julia, all of you, and stay safe. Let's go win this for people and planet. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Great to see you.
Good to see you too, always.
Thanks for joining.
Raina, I want to ask another question. You and I talked a couple of hours before we got started, and we talked a little bit about the Made in America tax plan, and thought that too is something we could go into the weeds with, so much that we might begin to consider a next May progress report where we follow up on what has happened with infrastructure and climate change, focus more on how we're going to pay for it, and see what is bubbling to the surface with the myriad of tax proposals that are out there being looked at right now. Raina, do you think that would be okay?
Yeah, sure, of course. Do you want me to finish going through the jobs plan, or finish?
I also want to say to everyone who's been thinking it would be great to see some of this in the weeds information, that we're going to put in the chat box the link to this PowerPoint presentation, and it includes a myriad of links that you can use yourself to go into the weeds. And having said that, Raina, I think I would like to ask if you'd be willing to go back and finish going through the American Jobs Plan, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about strategy, and then open it up to more discussion.
Absolutely. Okay, if on the PowerPoint you could bring it back up to the major themes, and then people can just see what it is I'm breaking down. So I think we stopped at number 4. It's not numbered by you, but 400 billion would go to solidify the infrastructure of our care economy by creating jobs and raising wages and benefits for essential home care workers. This is fantastic and about time. Specifically, it expands access to HCBS, home and community-based services, under Medicaid. This should allow more families to receive care at home from a loved one or in a supportive community. It also increases wages for caregiving jobs and allows for collective bargaining. In the plan states, and I quote, "Wages for essential home care workers are approximately $12 per hour, putting them among the lowest paid workers in our economy. In fact, 1 in 6 workers in this sector live in poverty," unquote. And I just have to say, yet a $15 minimum wage is not included in this plan. So that's definitely something we have to continue to fight for, because if he states that $12 an hour is not enough, then we can't even consider what Manchin and Sinema are talking about in terms of 10. So on to the next. Revitalize manufacturing, secure U.S. supply chains, invest in R&D, and train Americans for the jobs of the future. So 180 billion goes to invest in R&D, research and development. The breakdown of that is 50 billion to the National Science Foundation, creating actually, it's creating a technology directorate that will collaborate with and build on existing programs across the government. So it's a new program. 30 billion for R&D in rural areas, 40 billion to upgrade research infrastructure in labs. Half of these funds will be received by HBCUs, including creative focused on climate. 35 billion for technology breakthroughs in climate-focused research, clean energy tech, and jobs. 10 billion for R&D investment specifically at HBCUs and other MSIs. 15 billion in creating up to 200 centers of excellence that serve as research incubators at HBCUs and other MSIs to provide graduate fellowships and other opportunities for underserved populations. 300 billion will go to retool and revitalize US manufacturers and small businesses. 50 billion for a new office at the Department of Commerce dedicated to monitoring domestic industrial capacity and funding investments to support production of critical goods. 50 billion in semiconductor manufacturing and research, as called for in the Bipartisan CHIPS Act. 30 billion over 4 years in pandemic prevention, medical countermeasures, manufacturing, research and development, and related biopreparedness and biosecurity. 46 billion for federal procurement of clean energy manufacturing. 20 billion to at least 10 regional innovation hubs that will leverage private investment to fuel technology development, link urban and rural economies, and create new businesses, and to the Community Revitalization Fund that will be for community-led redevelopment projects. 52 billion for domestic manufacturers with focus on rural manufacturing and clean energy. 31 billion in programs to give small businesses access to credit, venture capital, and R&D dollars. And 5 billion for a new rural partnership program to help rural regions, including tribal nations. 100 billion investment in workforce development. 40 billion investment in new dislocated workers program. 12 billion to target workforce development opportunities in underserved communities. And 48 billion in American workforce development infrastructure and worker protection. And this includes registered apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships for people who also do not go to college. And lastly, create good quality jobs that pay prevailing wages in safe and healthy workplaces while ensuring workers have a free and fair choice to organize, join a union, and bargain collectively with their employers. To me, this was the weakest part of the plan, again, because there's no minimum wage and there's not a lot of detail in how this is going to be carried out and by whom. But it includes ensure all workers have a free and fair choice to join a union by passing the Protecting the Right to Organize Act and guarantee union and bargaining rights for public service workers. Domestic workers receive the legal benefits and protections they deserve and tackles pay inequities based on gender. Again, I don't know how they're planning on doing that. Demands that employers benefiting from these investments follow strong labor standards and remain neutral when their employees seek to organize a union and bargain collectively. Ties federal investments in clean energy and infrastructure to prevailing wages and require transportation investments to meet existing transit labor protections. And lastly, 10 billion for enforcement to protect workers and ensure employers are providing workers with good jobs, including jobs with fair and equal pay, whatever that is, safe and healthy workplaces, workplaces free from racial, gender, and other forms of discrimination and harassment, and will call for increased penalties when employers violate workplace safety and health rules. So hopefully there will be some teeth and people out there checking on these things. And that's it.
Thanks, Raina. You can see that the next slide will take us to the Made in America tax plan. And for general reference purposes, wherever in this presentation you see a heading or something that is in that kind of light gold color, that is a link to gold standard information that can take you into the weeds on this. And this may be a part of our emphasis for the May progress report as we try to see what the Biden administration is accomplishing and how we're going to pay for it. I'm going to just talk about the next two slides briefly so that we can use some of our remaining time for open discussion. I've mentioned how there are opportunities to get as much as possible out of this key year 2021, the first year of the Biden administration. And the Republican House and Senate is more interested in what is the old-fashioned, or some people call it hard infrastructure programming. And it's likely that they would be willing to fund roughly $800 billion of the Biden plan, which currently has a price tag of about $2 trillion. And one possibility there is to use a two-phase approach in the Senate, accepting the $800 billion offer on a bipartisanship level, and then going back right away and working on the soft infrastructure, the human aspects having to do with wages, healthcare, education, and all of the things that the Republican colleagues do not want to consider, in passing that via reconciliation. The Senate parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, has responded to Democratic questions about what is possible. And it now is the case that there are three, we've used one of them, and two more possibilities to pass legislation with the 50-50 split, and without having to worry about filibuster reform. And that would be one recommendation we might entertain. Then the plan that Raina just outlined in some detail is currently manifesting itself in the House of Representatives as HR 2, called the Moving Forward Act, which is appearing again. It's not the first time. It is being dealt with in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, led by Peter DeFazio from Oregon. And it includes much of what Raina outlined. And I'm just going to ask questions quickly here. Is it true that highways, bridges, transit, rail, airports, ports, and harbors has broader bipartisan support? Can we get that done quickly? And then schools and childcare. Is it possible that the temporary provisions of the American Rescue Plan can be sustained with the American Jobs Plan, or in this case, the Moving Forward Act? Then housing and broadband. Is that, how much renovation does that mean? How much can be devoted to affordable housing? And will universal broadband really take us out into the rural areas of the United States? And you can see the rest of the questions. In every case, those black topics are progressive questions that I think all of us have, and things we have questions about and want to push in the year 2021 and beyond, to make sure that whatever does get through the House and Senate in reconciliation really is bold and green. Also with the idea in mind that that climate clock continues to tick. All right, I'm going to return to this just in a few minutes and ask our Solidarity Sundays and Democrats Abroad Climate Caucus people to announce. But I want to spend a little bit of time now going back to our gallery and asking you, if you'd like to make a 1-minute statement, this would be a great time to do that on anything we have discussed, suggestions, opinions. And if you'd like to do that, please write * hands up in the chat box, and Renee will monitor that. Renee, do you see anything?
Not yet.
While we're waiting, then I'd like to ask Tanya to sign in with an announcement about the topic for this Sunday, Solidarity Sunday meeting, which is on a highly relevant topic. Tanya, please unmute yourself.
Hi. Hey, Bruce. Hey, everybody. Hi. This has been a really great taking apart, looking under the hood of the Biden's challenges, I guess is what we'd say. So listen, fixing democracy once a month. That's the slogan of Solidarity Sundays. We meet, we learn about one issue that affects our democracy, and we take one action to make things better. And this Sunday, our topic is For the People Act. We're going to be looking into that, in taking it apart. When we're finished, we're then going to be emailing our senators to support that act and to urge them to take strong measures to make sure it happens. Just a little note, because of Zoom, Solidarity Sundays is no longer an Ammerling house in Vienna. We're now online, which has opened us up outside of Vienna. So people all over Austria have joined us. It's opened us up all over Europe. We've had people from Norway and the UK join us. And it's opened us up outside of Europe proper. We've had Israel and South Africa joining us as well. As part of that, we are moving into what we're now, instead of Solidarity Sundays Vienna, we're now becoming Solidarity Sundays Europe. We're inaugurating that this weekend with it's going to be hosted by Juan, my co-coordinator and co-founder of Solidarity Sundays. He's just moved to Paris, where he quickly has become the chair of Paris Democrats Abroad. And his group that he's pulled together is going to be hosting this deep dive into the For the People Act and leading us into our emailing action. We would love for you guys to join us and take a part in that. And I'm going to put in the chat a link to RSVP if you can join us. It's at 4 to 6 p.m. on Sunday. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Tanya. And Arnie has had his hand up for a long time. I'd like to ask Arnie to unmute.
Hi, I'd like to know what Biden could do just by himself without the legislator.
Would anybody else like to comment on that?
Yeah.
I will say that just briefly, while someone else might be preparing to say something, that President Biden, between January 20th, Inauguration Day, and now has signed over 100 executive orders. And it includes things that are relative to this topic. And the concern is that executive orders are temporary. And it's so much better if we can pass legislation either via reconciliation or even with bipartisan support, because that is permanent. So I don't have an immediate link I can put into the chat for those executive orders, but if you do a Google search, you can see there are lists by category of all the things that he has done in the first, we're not really to 100 days yet. I think we're at about 92. But I think there may be more than 92 executive actions already. Do we have anybody else with star hands up, Renee?
Bruce Miller and then Raina. I'm not sure in which order they are. So
let's go with Bruce Miller first in Upper Austria. Bruce, could you unmute?
Okay, I think I'm on here. Yeah, first, thanks, Raina, for that really informative presentation. That was really good to hear. The main thing I wanted to say is on the filibuster issue. I think it's extremely important for the Democrats to keep in mind that they have to get the Protect the Vote Act through. I mean, the Republican state legislatures are very aggressive in the voter suppression measures, and even after the Voter Protection Act is passed, it still takes some time for the federal authorities to go in. There'll be legal challenges, and you know, primaries will be starting a year from now in 2022. So I don't see any way, I haven't heard any way they can get that through without changing the filibuster, at least for that. So I just think that's a really critical issue.
Thank you, Bruce. And before Tanya speaks again, Stephanie Lake has been waiting a long time. She would like to make an announcement about a new climate caucus that is taking shape. Stephanie?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Bruce, for introducing me. So this kind of follows the same idea that some others have mentioned, like with the Solidarity Sunday. So this is actually my introduction of the Democrats Abroad Germany Climate Caucus. So it's only for Germany right now. But the beautiful thing about Zoom is, you know, everyone can join and become a part of it. So clearly, by having me introduced here, and by talking about these subjects, you guys care about environmental issues, and I really appreciate that. And it's clear to all of us that climate change is a clear and present danger right now, and it's disproportionately hurting people of color, youth, impoverished. And there are numerous scientific studies showing this. So because all of this is happening right now, that means we need to be taking action as of yesterday or before that, right? So that's why I'm introducing the Democrats Abroad Germany Climate Caucus. And we're hoping to take some true, immediate, urgent action. However, we are newborn. I think we were just official on Monday. So we have a lot of work to do. And we're hoping that you can join us, even if you're not a Democrats Abroad Germany member. Doesn't matter, right? It's affecting the whole world. So with that, I'm asking you to hold us accountable and save the date for our official launch event. That's happening on June 5th, World Environment Day. We could not arrange it fast enough for Earth Day, you know. But yeah, so more details are coming. Please keep an eye out and please stay in touch. I will also put my contact information and Dash Nesbitt's contact information in the chat box. He is the main organizer, plus Allie McLean. I'm just here being ambassador. So yeah, I hope to hear back from some of you, especially since you all seem a lot more experienced than perhaps I in the legislative realm. And thank you so much for your time and patience for listening to me. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Stephanie. I want to mention that I have now twice placed the link for our PowerPoint presentation in the chat box. And for those of you who like the weeds, that's the place to go. Raina, you're up. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, it always takes me a minute to find my mute. The only thing I wanted to add about the jobs plan was that according to a lot of experts in climate change and in different issues that the jobs plan touched on, the reality is that it's only $2 trillion over a decade, and it really should be between 10 and 16 trillion. So we understand we have to go smaller because then otherwise it'd be crazy. But in my opinion, it's always better to go bigger at the beginning because you know you have to negotiate down. So I just wish, since it was 2 trillion over 10 years, perhaps he could have come in at 10 and maybe we would have gotten more. But now we're just starting at 2. So that's my 2 cents on that. And as for Arnie, I didn't chime in fast enough, but I can put the link to this in the chat box. In terms of what Biden could do for executive orders, through executive orders, there are a lot of things that he could do. Again, as Bruce said, they would be temporary, but at least they'd be temporary for 4 years. And one of the biggest is forgiving student debt. He could, with the swipe of a pen, wipe out 95% of student debt if he wanted to. He could crack down on Wall Street. He could expand immigration, ease the ban on marijuana, cut back on factory farming, which affects climate change and contamination of the environment. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll put the link to this article in the chat box so you can look at it and read it on your own.
All right, thank you very much. And thanks to those of you who are sticking with us. I take that as a sign that you may have some ideas, opinions, statements percolating. And I see Arnie's hand up again. Because he's spoken, I'll first ask if someone else would like to speak. Renee, do you see anything in the chat box?
Nothing, nope.
Then back to Arnie.
Hi. Well, I hope we can do two things at once, even, not wait on the legislator to get whatever we can do. But what I wanted to ask was about the federal bank, just printing money. Is that a problem for people?
We're hearing every day and every week more about modern monetary theory. And it seems as though right now, Janet Yellen and our president and many in the Democratic administration believe that it's important to spend. And in that context, we've heard the president say, maybe back in 2008, 2009, we made a mistake by not spending enough. And we realized after the fact that that brought with it higher costs. And right now I'm hearing and reading frequently that the cost of inaction is far, far higher than the costs associated with taking action right now. That in the long term, if we make the high necessary investments today, we'll save trillions and trillions of dollars, also human lives, also resources, shoreline and forests. And it seems as though right now there is the will. And the will, I think, exists when it's necessary during 2021 to twist the arms of people like Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin to get the Democratic caucus in line so that we can do some very, very major things with those two remaining reconciliation opportunities we have. If we get to the end of 2021 and haven't used those to get many of these big things done, as a progressive Democrat, I'm going to be honestly kind of upset. Also with that climate clock ticking louder and louder. Would anybody else like to sign in at this point too? If you want to just raise your hand or unmute and say, it's me, go ahead.
Can I chime in for a second, Bruce?
Go for it, Rena.
I just wanted to also answer Arnie's question about making money. This is actually a legislative bill right now that was put forth by Rashida Tlaib. And I'll just read it to you very quickly. Put forward a plan that would have the US Treasury strike 2 $1 trillion coins to raise funds for a stimulus package designed to provide economic relief. Under the plan, the Treasury would mint 2 $1 trillion coins, then deposit them at the Federal Reserve. Forced by law to recognize the coins as legal tender, the Fed would add $2 trillion to the Treasury's account. The Treasury would then use this money under Congress's direction for stimulus. So this is not a new idea. It's been around a long time. It is absolutely possible if we wanted to do so. Again, there's further discussion as how it would affect inflation. But again, when you're in a pandemic and an economic crisis and climate crisis, it might be the time to take more drastic steps. But again, I can also drop the draft bill by Rashida Tlaib in the chat box if you'd like to read it.
We also revised our PowerPoint presentation, and at one point we had an entire slide dedicated just to existing tax reform proposals. And I'd like to say we would like to come back and take a look at those, so that in addition to maybe creating $2 trillion coins, if you think about the tax reform of the last maybe couple of decades, most often it has been something that has been intended to reduce the size of the federal government, taking resources away from the people and putting them in the hands of the wealthy, with the claim that it would trickle down, which I haven't seen too much of. And right now there is a handful, maybe two handfuls of really amazing tax proposals that also would pay for much of what we would like to accomplish with infrastructure, climate change, and other kinds of justice, also solving some of the problems of income inequality. And I'm fairly certain that we're going to pick that up in our progress report in May and take a look at some of those options, also including a bill designed just to tighten up the IRS system so that it has the power to collect the taxes that go uncollected, which is in the tens of billions of dollars every year. It has that bill, the great acronym CHEAT. Are there others who are having ideas, opinions, suggestions? Bruce Miller?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Dick Cheney, back when he was the de facto president under Bush, at one point said that Reagan proved that deficits don't matter. And that's the actual Republican Party position on deficits, even though they suddenly get very concerned about it when there's a Democratic president.
There has been an amazing redistribution of our gross domestic product in the United States over the past few decades. And right now, we're looking at opportunities to sort of change the course with that. And if we succeed, then it also is incumbent on us to demonstrate that we can use the resources that we have wisely. And I, for example, like it quite a bit when Biden speaks about that and says that he also has proven that he can spend money with little waste. I want to hold him accountable for that, and to make sure that we can use funds wisely if we are given the resources. And there are huge resources available out there. Raina, would you like to speak again?
I'm sorry. What are you asking about?
You still have your hand up, and I think I misread
Oh,
that.
nope, that's me not knowing how to use a computer.
I am really curious to hear from others and what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and what they think we can accomplish this year with infrastructure and climate change. You just want to wave, that's enough. Teresa?
Hi. I mean, maybe I'm off topic now. I don't even know. I'm trying to process everything I've heard. I just wanted to say that in the area of affordable housing, I had direct information that what used to be the law, which is that children of different sexes, when they get affordable housing under Section 8, would get their own rooms, because after a certain age, it would no longer be healthy for children to be together, to have to live together in the same room, even brothers and sisters, that they should have their own room. Now I was told directly that in the community that I used to live in, they've changed that. They've told people that the law has changed. I don't know if that was under Trump, because it wasn't true before, that they now have to, like people who've had, like single mothers, for example, that have had 3-bedroom apartments under Section 8, were allowed to have their room, and then a room for a boy and a room for a girl. Now, no matter what the sex is, the children have to share a room. So this is what I was told directly to somebody, that the law was changed, somebody that was on the list to get this help with rent, some help with rent based on income, especially during the pandemic, because she was a home health aide and she could know she had to stay home with a disabled child who no longer could go to school and had to be at home schooled, with what do you call it, online school. And she was called saying that her name had come up on the list, but that she would now be forced, her teenage daughter, who's 15, would now have to live with the 8-year-old disabled boy. So whatever that's worth, again, I feel like people who have the least are being punished. That's my feeling. I feel that's really wrong. And I don't even understand it. I don't even know how Ben Carson, who was the head of HUD, would okay that kind of thing. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Teresa. And was that in the state of New York?
Yes, New York. In rural New York.
All right. Well, we've been at it now for 90 minutes, and I'm very happy that some of you are still here and willing to continue a little longer if you would like. I want to mention that when all is said and done, it seems to me that this is all going to work if we become active, and if we, as Michelle said earlier and others say all the time, if we are willing to write to our senators, call our representatives, and participate in campaigns by, in this case, the wide variety of organizations that include the Sierra Club or Greenpeace or the Sunrise Movement, and the organizations that you know of and perhaps already are connected to some extent. I would say we can know that something is going to work and can measure that based on what we do personally. And if you're at a loss for something to do, I would also say, as we move through the end of April and into May, also think about not only this, but plant a tree or two somewhere, become a guerrilla gardener. I've planted 3 or 4 already in the last couple of weeks, and I tell you, it is a heck of a lot of fun. But don't leave it at that. That's just to get your feet wet a little bit. Would anybody else like to sign in, perhaps with a closing comment or thought? Or perhaps share a story with us about something that you've heard about in the United States?
Well, I just wanted to underline something that you just mentioned, Bruce, about it's really important for us to contact our senators and our congresspeople. It's something that we learned in our research with Solidarity Sundays is very few Americans actually are in contact with their elected officials. So contacting them does have weight. And even if they are people you disagree with and they're doing exactly the opposite of what you want them to do, they need to know that you as a constituent are watching, keeping an eye on them. Their staff keeps track of how many yeses and nos on different issues, which issues are bubbling up. And it's important to do it. It does help. And it's part of what we say democracy is all about, is to stay engaged. And it's a way of keeping that alive and making sure that other people do it as well. But it always starts with you. Do it yourself, do it often whenever an issue is really important to you. Climate change, filibuster reform, getting our voting reforms over the line, very critical. They need to hear that this is our priorities, and then they will make it their priorities. So I just wanted to reinforce that. It's something very important.
Thank you very much, Tanya. And Arnie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, when we're putting pressure on the government, it seems like we should be putting more pressure on Biden and on the executive. I don't think we should just accept Biden's perspective and we should go beyond just supporting Biden and try to influence his policies.
It certainly stands to reason now that he is gathering more and more of a record, and he is really expressing bold plans. And I think that it is important for us to say that we support those bold plans. Today, I think it was at 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Daylight Time, he said that the United States nationally determined contribution will be to reduce CO2 emissions by 50% in 2030. And that is something that can take your breath away. And it seems to me we're left then with the option to say, yeah, sure, I don't believe that. Or to say, yes, that is exactly what we're going to do. I support you, and then push. I think it is our job to be progressive pushers.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much for nodding. Would you like to sign in with a few words?
Well, thank you, Bruce, for calling on me. I just have to say that this has been a very informative session. Thank you so much for all the organizers, Sue and Reina, amazing. And Michelle previously with her words about and presentation on the, Climate Council at the DNC. And I'm very grateful. I mean, keep on doing. And I do agree with you that we have to be progressive pushers, most definitely.
Yes. Okay. I don't know how to do this. Stop.
I want to say too that when we consider developing more caucuses, it seems as though in the case of a climate caucus, we have to perceive the DNC Council on the Environment and Climate Crisis as our very, very natural ally. They've done a lot of work already, and they have a very impressive web presence. And it seems to me we ought to think about plugging into that and making sure we use all of its resources. Teresa, do you have a final comment? If so, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, yes, if there's time, I'd like to say something. Okay, everybody knows, I think, about the guilty verdict yesterday in the Floyd case. Hallelujah, that's all I can say, thank God. And I just wanted to know if anybody knows, well, I just wanted to encourage any American to please write to the sheriff or the captain of the police force in that area in Minnesota. I don't even know the name of the town, but I'm going to find out because I think we should write. This has never happened. This is a chief of police that testified against his own officer and the other policeman, whoever, there were two people that were in the trial. I didn't watch the trial. I couldn't bear to watch the trial, but I watched the prosecutor and the closing statement. It was amazing. And I feel that we should write to the people who did the right thing for justice, because it's so rare. And I realized that if it hadn't have been for that video, it never would have happened. His name wasn't even on the original statement that just said that a suspect was literally died in a medical incident. That's literally all that they had on this man's death. And all I can say is, it sure is about time. And I would encourage any American to please write with congratulations, praise, as much as they can, to encourage more good policemen to do the right thing, because that is what we need. That's what's going to make the difference. If we don't do that, it's the same thing with the lady just said, writing our congressmen, writing our senators, writing people in government, writing the people that can make the difference. So I just wanted to say that, because I couldn't let the meeting go by without mentioning that verdict. Thank you.
What we saw in that case was a very, very powerful example of citizens standing up and taking action.
Right.
I see that Pierre also has his hand up. Pierre, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, hi. I'm very happy that we brought up the this trial, and I totally agree with what has just been said. And obviously, we saw a lot of we saw a lot of praise and a lot of just enthusiasm and happiness coming out of this trial verdict. The one thing that bothered me is, and I know, this is a progressive kind of thing, but the one reaction that did bother me, however, was the reaction that AOC had. Okay, and what bothered me is that she said that she was basically denying everything that has been said, and saying that justice was not served, that appropriate justice was for George Floyd to be alive. And I think that can be that's not entirely false, but I just think that this is what was the right thing to do, was to convict this cop Derek Chauvin, and just saying that no, this is not enough. Okay, fine, it might be something that's not enough, but it is already a step in the right direction. We can't have everything right away, and I don't know. I just I didn't feel comfortable with AOC after she said that. I don't know about everybody else, but that's just my opinion of all of that, since we're now bringing up this this trial. Thanks.
Right away doesn't mean 1 year. Right away, we're talking about 350 years. That's not right away. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
That's what she's trying to say. She's trying to say it's not right away because it's it wasn't just last year. We're talking about centuries. Okay, so let's let's understand.
Yeah, that's what she means.
That's what she meant. It's not right away. I'm sorry.
Right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Pierre and Sharon Ann. Do we have any other final comments on that subject or on the subject of our event this evening? If not, I'm going to say we really live in exciting, challenging times. And I want to thank all of you for your statements about our need to take action. And we're going to take action with the progress reports. The actual title should have been after almost 100 days. When we meet again in May, there likely will be many, many more things that have happened, more things to talk about. I think that the interest we had around this topic and the crucial character of it means that it is a good idea to take a look once more at what is going on with infrastructure and climate change, and perhaps looking at the tax bills and other topics related to how we're going to pay for it. And hopefully by the middle to the end of May, we will see that we aren't going to have to wait to July or August or September, that something is going to get done. And if it looks to us as though it's not getting done, then we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do to make sure that it gets done as that climate clock and the many other clocks with criminal justice, racial justice, environmental justice, that we keep moving on all of those fronts. Thank you very much to everyone for participating.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Thank
have a
you.
good rest of your
Thank you.
birthday.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, everyone.